Today is Thursday, September 12th. What to know today about a Supreme Court ruling impacting immigration, and a new law that has Uber fighting back, plus a major discovery beyond our solar system, and Yelp is getting personal. Then hang out after the news for Thing to Know Thursday's bonus interview. Welcome to The Newsworthy. All the day's news in less than 10 minutes. Fast, fair, fun, and on the go. I'm Erica Mandy. Thanks so much for being here. You ready? Let's do this. The Supreme Court is backing one of President Trump's toughest immigration policies, at least for now. The AP reports the Supreme Court's ruling reverses a lower court's decision that put the policy on hold. So now the Trump administration can move forward with its plan and enforce a rule affecting asylum seekers. The rule says if they pass through another country on their way to the United States, they must try to get asylum protections in that other country first. For example, people coming from El Salvador or Guatemala cannot seek asylum in the U.S. if they did not first ask for it in Mexico. It could prevent most Central American immigrants who are leaving poverty and violence from getting protections in the United States. To be clear, it's not a completely done deal. The policy is still being challenged in lower courts. The Supreme Court simply said the rule can go into effect in the meantime. President Trump calls it a big win for border security. His administration says this will help deal with the, quote, unprecedented surge of people coming into the country illegally, then seeking asylum if they're caught. NBC News says the immigration courts are backlogged with 436,000 asylum requests. But others, like the ACLU, say people's lives are at stake here as they face serious threats in their home countries. So while the court case continues, the Trump administration says it will start enforcing the new rule ASAP. There could be a national ban on flavored e-cigarettes. President Trump says he's worried about the growing number of kids who use the devices, and it's time to do something about it. So now President Trump has given the FDA the okay to come up with a plan to remove all vape flavors from store shelves. That includes mint and fruity flavors, which teens tend to like. The only flavor that would be allowed is tobacco. Remember, federal health officials are already looking into hundreds of cases of a mysterious lung illness and a handful of deaths from it that have been linked to vaping. They're also investigating some companies for marketing to kids. So because of these problems, plenty of people are welcoming a possible ban on certain flavorings. But it's also facing some criticism. ABC News reports vaping advocates say the flavors helped them quit traditional cigarettes. So at this point, nothing is set in stone. The FDA says it could take several weeks to come up with a plan. By the way, some states are already taking action. We told you last week how Michigan became the first state to ban the sale of flavored e-cigarettes. The New York Times says Massachusetts, New York, and California are also thinking about doing the same. It's been such a big issue, especially recently, that it is also today's Thing to Know Thursday interview topic right after the news. We'll talk about that mysterious illness linked to vaping and what studies have and have not shown about e-cigarettes. A major pharmaceutical company may have reached a deal to settle a couple thousand lawsuits against it. State and local governments have sued Purdue Pharma, accusing the company of fueling the opioid crisis. Purdue Pharma makes the highly addictive prescription painkiller Oxycontin, and the New York Times says it's seen as an early driver of the epidemic. So now Purdue Pharma is looking to settle. The Washington Post reports the settlement could cost the company and its owners somewhere between $10 and $12 billion. The company would also declare bankruptcy and could be turned into a new company to help fight the opioid epidemic. That said, they would not admit wrongdoing. So some states are on board with this deal, saying it's the fastest way to justice, but not all of them. Some want more money and more consequences for the company. If this settlement does not work out, the case could go to trial, so stay tuned. A new law in California could change how the so-called gig economy operates. California lawmakers passed the Assembly Bill 5. It basically makes it harder for companies like Uber and Lyft to classify their so-called gig workers as just independent contractors. And it provides a sort of stricter test for who should be considered employees. The main difference? Employees must receive things like minimum wage, overtime pay, and other benefits, which of course could cost a company more money. The Hill reports the governor of California is expected to sign this bill into law, and it would take effect January 1st. But even then, Uber is not having it. Uber says it will not treat its drivers in the state as employees, and it can still prove they should be contractors. As for the drivers themselves, well, some have already been pushing for this, so they're all for the change to get more benefits. But other drivers worry it will take away some of their flexibility. Expect even more legal fights on this employment issue. The third round of Democratic debates is tonight. Only 10 presidential candidates are participating in this one. Remember, the last two debates both had 20 candidates over 2 different nights. But this time, it was harder to qualify. So what to expect tonight? Well, for one, this is the first time Elizabeth Warren and Joe Biden will be on the same stage debating each other. And Vox reports the frontrunner, Biden, will actually be standing between the other 2 top candidates right now, Warren and Bernie Sanders. It all starts at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on ABC. More news ahead, but first, thank you to our sponsor today, Blinkist. We're all busy, so it can be hard to find the time to read, learn something new, and develop our own skills. Well, Blinkist makes it so much easier. Blinkist is the only app that takes the best key takeaways from thousands of nonfiction books and breaks them down for you into just 15 minutes. It allows me to get some advice from top business experts in just minutes. But maybe you're into other types of personal development, or history, or science. The massive library is always growing, and 8 million people are already using Blinkist. I also like that you get a choice to either read it right in the app or listen on the go. I always recommend reading Factfulness to remind us that our world is not quite as bad as we think. But there are other great and popular books like Start With Why by Simon Sinek and The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. And right now, Blinkist has a special offer for a free 7-day trial. Go to Blinkist.com/news to start your free 7-day trial. That's Blinkist, spelled Blinkist, Blinkist.com/news. Now back to the news. For the first time in 13 years, the U.S. men's basketball team is not walking away with the gold at a major international tournament. NBC Sports reports the U.S. lost to France at the FIBA World Cup quarterfinals yesterday. Before that, though, the U.S. won 58 straight games with NBA players in the Olympics, World Cup, and FIBA since 2006. Plus, the U.S. was trying to be the first nation to win 3 World Cups in a row, but it didn't happen. The good news, though, they're still going to the 2020 Olympics. And in other sports news, ESPN reports the Los Angeles Dodgers are heading to the playoffs. They're the top team in the NL West for the 7th season in a row, and the first major league team to secure a spot in the 2019 postseason. There are still a few more weeks left in the regular season, but the other teams in their division would not be able to catch up. For the first time, scientists found water on a planet outside of our solar system. And that's a big deal because it could mean something or someone may be able to survive there. National Geographic says the exoplanet, which just means it's a planet orbiting a different star than the sun, is about the size of Earth and it's 110 light years away from Earth. 2 research teams used data from the Hubble Space Telescope to check out the planet's atmosphere, and they both found water vapor. One even said it looks like it could be raining there. Plus, the planet is close enough to its star to be warm enough for life. Right now, this is the only planet outside of our solar system that we know of that has both water and temperatures to support life. Next up, find out if there are gases on the planet. The BBC says to do that, researchers need to wait for the next generation of telescopes, which are set to come out in the 2020s. Apple is running 3 new health studies, and the company wants you to take part. Of course, you have to be okay with sharing your data. CNET says you just download Apple's new Research app on your Apple Watch or iPhone. Then it will start to track your health data and share it with Apple and major health organizations. Apple will use the data for 3 different studies, including long-term effects of loud noise, how menstrual cycles can inform the screenings for infertility, and how activity and movement impact our overall health. The Apple Research app will be available later this year. Yelp will start personalizing your results for the first time. Here's how it should work. Wired says you create a profile on the Yelp app and pick the things you like and dislike. So things like dietary restrictions, what hobbies you have, and if you have children or pets. Then every time you search for something, Yelp will keep those things in mind and give you more customized results. Yelp is about to turn 15 years old next month, so The Verge says it's actually pretty surprising that kind of personalization has not been available on Yelp until now. The feature is available now on Apple phones and should roll out to Android users next year. And that's it for the main news today, but it's now time for Thing to Know Thursday, where a different expert explains a different thing to know, only on Thursdays after the news. And this week, we're talking about that mysterious lung illness linked to vaping that's caused hundreds of people to get sick and at least 6 deaths. So what is it? Why is it a problem now? And what's being done about it? My guest today is Dr. Albert Rizzo, the Chief Medical Officer for the American Lung Association. Here's our 5-minute conversation about vaping. Hi, Dr. Rizzo. Thanks so much for coming on The Newsworthy.
Thank you.
So first, what is known right now about this mysterious lung illness that has been linked to vaping?
That there's a wide variation as far as the type of device that's used, the intensity of using the vaping, the product, and the common denominator is vaping. We know that some of them use THC in the product. We know some just use a nicotine product. But the important thing is that both CDC and FDA agree that we haven't been able to pinpoint one particular device, substance, or product that is the culprit at this point. So when you ask what we do know, we know that there's a lot of unanswered questions.
And I want to be clear because at least some of the articles that I've read have said that it's more linked to cannabis or marijuana than it is nicotine. What's the truth behind that?
The majority were reported to use THC as compared to nicotine, but almost 20% were also just using nicotine by itself, and the rest were using a combination of the two. So, and there's also been some citing that it may be vitamin E oil related to cannabis. These have been found in a few cases, but there's nothing that's been found in every case that's been able to be the common denominator throughout. So we just got to be cautious that we're not rushing to judgment about one thing that's the culprit and potentially miss the real issue, because it could be a combination of factors leading to the illness in these individuals.
And we now know of hundreds of reported cases around the country. Why are these all popping up now, and why are we talking about it now while vaping has been around for at least a little while?
So I think the feeling is that this is a new problem. It's not just vaping that's leading to this, but there seems to be some change in the devices that are being used, or possibly off the street type of substances that are put into some of these electronic nicotine or electronic cigarettes. And the reason we're seeing more of them, certainly over the last couple of months, is the recognition among both patients who have the symptoms as well as the physicians treating these patients. Once the first couple cases were noted and a link was started to be made between the symptoms and the behavior of vaping, more and more physicians looked at it. In fact, now we're having physicians thinking that, well, maybe I saw a case of this a month or two ago and didn't realize what it was. Because you have to remember that many times patients who present with these kind of symptoms aren't always very upfront about what they had been doing that might have precipitated this. This is especially true if it was a child or a young person who was in the presence of their parents who didn't want to admit that they were using a THC vaping device, for example. So the history is very important in each of these cases in order to get to the common denominator that might lead to a solution at this point.
We know that federal health officials are investigating right now. How long can this process be to come up with the real cause of this? And what can we expect to be done on a policy level?
So from a standpoint of this particular issue, we have to be very diligent about getting more and more information as the cases pop up. Right now there are some recommendations saying that if you don't vape, don't start. If you do vape, stop. From a policy standpoint, the most we can do at this point is to ask the FDA to try to remove anything that would be attractive to younger people using these devices. This includes getting the flavorings off the market. And ultimately, the FDA has to take regulatory control over these devices in general, meaning they have to have the devices reviewed with regard to what's in them, how do they work, and ultimately, do they cause harm in the lungs?
And I think it's worth noting, and we've talked about this before on our show, that it is now considered an epidemic, vaping is, among teens.
Yes, the unfortunate thing is that if you look at adults who smoke in this country, it's about 14%, which is down quite a bit from several years ago. But unfortunately, we have 20% of adolescents who have been vaping. So we have a whole new generation who have been exposed to nicotine by way of these devices. Nicotine, especially in this age group, is very effective on the brain to cause addiction. So we have a generation addicted now to nicotine. And unfortunately, in the adolescent and childhood age group, the nicotine replacement drugs are not all approved for that age group. So we have to use counseling and other methods to raise awareness and educate individuals about getting off of these devices, because we really don't know what the mid to long-term effects are.
And to that point, even for adults, we just saw the e-cigarette company Juul get in trouble for claiming that vaping is safer than traditional cigarettes. But there's really no evidence to back that up, right?
That's right. There's plenty of studies that show there's still emissions coming off of this vapor that includes heavy metals, it includes carcinogens, and it's very hard to say that you're seeing something safer than tobacco, which kills 500,000 Americans a year. So the studies are not there to show it's safer. The studies are not there to show that it's an effective smoking cessation device. Everybody can quit with the proper interactions, but we don't want to jump to using a device that could eventually lead to people being on nicotine indefinitely, because getting off of tobacco and getting onto e-cigarettes still means the addiction is there, and we still don't know what the long-term effect of being on an e-cigarette for 10, 15, or 20 years is.
And there are programs and information available to help teens quit vaping and help their parents help their teens quit. You can find all that information in today's show notes on thenewsworthy.com. That's also where you can read more about this topic and all the news stories mentioned in this episode. Just go to thenewsworthy.com/show notes and find today's date. Thank you for listening. The Newsworthy is here for you by 4 in the morning every weekday, so we'll chat again tomorrow. Have a great day.